White cop humiliates young black man, but doesn't know he's his new boss. Hello, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. The summer sun beat down on the streets of Millbrook, Ohio, a town where progress and tradition danced a clumsy waltz. Ryan Callahan, a 15-year veteran of the local police department, was driving his car through the familiar streets of the Oak Hill neighborhood. His eyes, hardened by years of service, scanned the cracked sidewalks and worn buildings with a mixture of suspicion and determination. The radio crackled with routine calls, but Ryan barely listened. His mind was focused on a personal mission, maintaining order in a city that, in his view, was always on the brink of chaos. Every corner was a potential flashpoint, every passerby a potential suspect. Years of experience had shaped his perspective, transforming his approach from protect and serve to something closer to control and dominate. As he turned onto Maple Avenue, something caught his eye. A young black man, perhaps in his early 20s, was walking hurriedly down the sidewalk, a backpack slung over his shoulder. Ryan felt the familiar tightening in his stomach, that sensation that mixed adrenaline and prejudice. Without hesitation, he turned on the siren and pulled the car over. "Hey you!" Ryan shouted, getting out of the car with his hand instinctively resting on his gun. "Stop right there!" The young man froze, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Sir?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Did I do something wrong?" Ryan approached, his posture intimidating. "Identify yourself. What are you doing in this neighborhood?" "My name is Lucas, sir. Lucas Washington. I'm going to community college. I have class in half an hour." Ryan narrowed his eyes, examining Lucas from top to bottom. The backpack, the books visible through the half-open zipper, everything seemed to confirm the young man's story. But years of mistrust were not easily dispelled. "You shouldn't be walking around here," Ryan growled, his voice laden with authority and ill-concealed prejudice. "This isn't a safe neighborhood for someone like you." Lucas swallowed, clearly struggling to keep his composure. "I live here, sir. I was born and raised in Oak Hill." The tension in the air was palpable. Passers-by began to slow down, watching the scene with a mixture of concern and resignation. It wasn't the first time they'd witnessed something like this, and they all knew it wouldn't be the last. Ryan stepped forward, invading Lucas' personal space. "Listen up, kid. I don't want to see you wandering around here, understand? Next time, I might not be so understanding." Lucas nodded silently, his eyes fixed on the floor. Humiliation was evident in every line of his body, but there was something else there, a spark of determination, a silent refusal to be broken. Satisfied with his show of authority, Ryan returned to his car. As he drove away, he saw Lucas in the rearview mirror making his way back, his shoulders bent under the weight of something much bigger than his backpack. The incident had only lasted a few minutes, but its ripples would extend far beyond that moment. Ryan followed his patrol, convinced that he had done his job protecting the streets of Millbrook. Little did he know that that brief encounter would be the catalyst for a change that would shake not only his career, but the entire structure of the Millbrook Police Department. Meanwhile, Lucas continued on his way to college, Ryan's words echoing in his mind. "Don't walk in this neighborhood, or I'll arrest you." The phrase, unspoken but clearly implied, would haunt him for days. But instead of fear, a resolution grew inside him. One day, Lucas thought, things would be different. One day, he would make a difference. The sun continued to shine over Millbrook, indifferent to the drama unfolding on its streets. But the seeds of change had been planted, and soon, very soon, they would begin to sprout. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the Millbrook Police Department as Ryan Callahan entered the red brick building. The air conditioning hummed softly, contrasting with the palpable tension that hung in the air. Something was different, and Ryan could feel it down to his bones. "Emergency meeting in the conference room," announced Sergeant Peterson, his deep voice echoing down the corridor. "All officers now." Ryan frowned, exchanging confused glances with his colleagues as they made their way to the room. Emergency meetings were rare at Millbrook, usually reserved for crisis situations or major changes. The room was packed when Ryan entered, the buzz of nervous conversations filling the atmosphere. Chief Donovan, a burly man with grey hair, was standing at the front of the room, his expression unreadable. "Ladies and gentlemen," began Donovan, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife, "I have an important announcement. As of today, we will have a new leader for our Internal Affairs and Police Reform Unit." A murmur of surprise went through the room. Ryan felt his stomach turn. Police reform was a delicate topic, especially in recent years. "Please welcome Captain Lucas Washington." The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan felt the blood run cold in his veins when a familiar figure entered the room. It was the young man he had approached that morning, now wearing an impeccable suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Lucas walked to the front of the room, his eyes scanning the astonished faces of the officers. When his gaze met Ryan's, there was a brief flash of recognition, followed by an expression of determination. "Thank you, Chief Donovan," Lucas began, his voice firm and clear. "I am honored for this opportunity to work with all of you to improve our department and our community." Ryan barely heard the words that followed. His mind was in a whirl, reliving that morning's meeting, now in a completely different light. Shame and fear mixed in his chest, threatening to suffocate him. After the meeting, Ryan tried to leave discreetly, but a hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Officer Callahan," Lucas' voice was calm but firm. "Can we talk in private?" In Lucas' newly assigned office, the silence was heavy. Ryan stood, restless, while Lucas sat behind his desk, his eyes studying the older officer. "I imagine this is a surprise for you," Lucas began. Ryan swallowed. "Sir, About this morning," Lucas held up his hand, interrupting him. "I'm not here to punish or shame anyone, Officer Callahan. I'm here to make real, positive change. What happened this morning is exactly the kind of thing we need to address." Ryan felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I understand, sir." "No, you don't. Not yet," Lucas said, leaning forward. "But you will. We all will. This is an opportunity for us to do things differently, to truly serve and protect our community, our whole community." As Ryan left the office, his mind was in turmoil. Years of certainties and prejudices were being challenged, and he felt lost in a sea of doubt. Outside, the sun was beginning to set over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was the end of a day, but the beginning of something much bigger. A change was coming to Millbrook, and nothing would ever be the same. Captain Lucas Washington's office was a study in contrasts. The walls, still bare, waited for a personality to fill them, while the mahogany desk, an heirloom from his predecessor, emanated an aura of established authority. Lucas was sitting behind it, his fingers drumming gently on the polished surface as he waited for his next visitor. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, straightening up in his chair. Ryan Callahan entered, his face a mask of professional neutrality that barely concealed the underlying tension. "You wanted to see me, Captain?" Lucas nodded, gesturing to the chair in front of him. "Please sit down, Officer Callahan. We have a lot to discuss." Ryan obeyed, his stiff movements betraying his discomfort. Silence hung between them for a moment, heavy with unspoken expectations and mutual apprehension. "Do you know why I called you here today?" Lucas finally asked, his eyes fixed on Ryan. The older officer swallowed. "I imagine it's about our previous encounter?" Lucas leaned forward, interlacing his fingers on the table. "Partly, yes. But it's more than that. I want to understand you, Ryan. I want to understand what led you to become the kind of policeman you are today." Ryan blinked, surprised by the direct approach. I don't know what you mean." "Let me be clear," Lucas continued, his voice firm but not hostile. "I grew up in this city. I've seen firsthand the impact that officers like you have on the community. The fear, the mistrust, the anger. But I also know that no one is born wanting to cause pain. So tell me, what happened to you?" The silence that followed was tense, charged with repressed emotions. Ryan looked away, fixing his gaze on a distant point beyond the window. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "You have no idea what it's like to be out there, day after day, seeing the worst that people have to offer," he began. "I came into this profession wanting to make a difference, but..." "But what?" Lucas pressed gently. Ryan sighed deeply. "But the reality is different. You see things that change you. You lose partners, friends. You start to see threats everywhere." Lucas nodded, understanding. "I understand that, Ryan. More than you realize. But that doesn't justify treating innocent people like criminals." "And you?" Ryan retorted, a spark of defiance in his eyes. "How did a kid who grew up in Oak Hill end up here, giving orders to veteran cops?" For a moment, Lucas' professional mask faltered, revealing a vulnerability that surprised Ryan. "It wasn't easy," Lucas admitted. "Growing up in Oak Hill, being stopped and searched for no reason, seeing friends arrested for crimes they didn't commit. That could have made me hate the police. Instead, it made me want to change it from the inside out." The revelation hung between them, subtly changing the dynamic in the room. Ryan found himself reevaluating the young captain in front of him, seeing him not as a threat, but as someone who, despite everything, had chosen a path of hope. "I'm not here to be your enemy, Ryan," Lucas continued. "I'm here because I believe we can do better, all of us. But that starts with honesty and a willingness to change." When Ryan finally got up to leave, he felt different, not completely transformed, but shaken in his convictions. Lucas' words echoed in his mind, challenging years of ingrained habits and prejudices. Outside, Millbrook continued her daily routine, oblivious to the conversation that could change the course of her future. But inside that office, the seeds of change had been planted. It remained to be seen whether they would find fertile soil in which to grow. Autumn arrived in Millbrook with an explosion of color, the trees along Main Avenue painted in shades of red and gold. But inside the police department, a storm was brewing. Ryan Callahan was sitting at his desk, his eyes fixed on a pile of reports that seemed harmless at first glance. But the more he read, the more his stomach churned. Discrepancies in drug seizures, money missing from evidence, conflicting testimony in cases of excessive use of force. Patterns were emerging, and they painted a disturbing picture. A soft touch on his shoulder startled him. It was Captain Lucas Washington, his face a mask of concern. "Found anything?" Lucas asked in a low voice. Ryan hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I think so, sir. And it's not good." Lucas pulled up a chair, taking a seat next to Ryan. "Show me." For an hour, they immersed themselves in the documents, connecting dots that had gone unnoticed for years. The picture that emerged was of a network of corruption deeply rooted in the department. "This goes beyond a few bad cops," Ryan muttered, running his hand over his tired face. "It's systemic." Lucas nodded gravely. "And that's why we're here, Ryan, to change the system." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the distant hum of the air conditioning and the occasional ringing of phones. "Some of these names," Ryan finally spoke, his voice shaking. "I know them. I've worked with them for years. I trusted them." Lucas put a comforting hand on Ryan's shoulder. "I know it's hard, but we have to do what's right, not what's easy." Ryan looked at the young captain, seeing in him a determination that both inspired and frightened him. "What do we do now?" "Now," Lucas said, standing up, "we investigate further, but carefully. We don't know how high up this goes, or who might be involved." In the weeks that followed, Ryan and Lucas worked tirelessly, often late into the night. They scoured old files, discreetly interviewed informants, and built a case that could not be ignored. But as their investigation progressed, the tension in the department grew. Suspicious eyes followed them through the corridors. Conversations stopped abruptly when they entered a room. One evening, as Ryan was leaving the building, he noticed a car parked across the street, the driver watching him intently. A shiver ran down his spine, and he hurried to his own vehicle. Back in his apartment, Ryan locked the door and dropped onto the sofa, his mind spinning. He picked up a framed photo from the coffee table, him and his colleagues at a department barbecue a few years ago, Smiling faces stared back at him, some of the same faces that now figured in his investigation. His phone vibrated with a message from Lucas. "Meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m. We need to discuss our next steps." Ryan replied with a simple, "Okay," but his finger hovered over the keyboard. There was so much he wanted to say, so many doubts and fears that consumed him. But he swallowed them, knowing that the road ahead would be difficult. As night fell over Millbrook, Ryan Callahan lay awake, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, thinking about the choices that had brought him here and the ones he still had to make. The truth was coming out, and there was no turning back now. Dawn in Millbrook brought with it a fine mist that hung over the streets, as if the city itself was trying to hide from the secrets that threatened to come to light. At the police department, the day started early for Ryan Callahan and Lucas Washington. The two men were huddled in Lucas' office, their blinds closed and their voices low, aware of the ears that might be lurking. "We have to be careful," Lucas muttered, spreading out documents on his desk. "The more we dig, the deeper this rabbit hole seems to be." Ryan nodded, his face marked by sleepless nights. "I discovered something last night," he said, pulling a folder from his backpack. "Records of suspicious transactions linked to Sergeant Briggs." Lucas frowned, picking up the papers. "Briggs? He's one of the most respected people in the department." "Exactly," Ryan replied, his voice laced with disappointment. "If he's involved, who else could be?" Before Lucas could answer, a knock on the door interrupted them. They both straightened up, exchanging tense glances. "Come in," Lucas called, his voice controlled. The door opened, revealing Officer Michael Chen, a rookie in the department known for his integrity. "Sorry to interrupt, Captain," he said, his nervous eyes flicking between Lucas and Ryan. "But I thought you should know. There are rumors going around. People are talking about an internal investigation." Lucas stood up, his face a mask of professional calm. "Thanks, Chen. Can you close the door on your way out?" As soon as they were alone again, Lucas' facade crumbled. "That's not good," he muttered, wiping his hand across his face. "If the corrupt know we're investigating..." "They'll try to protect themselves," Ryan added, the reality of the situation weighing heavily on his shoulders. The next few days were a test of nerves. Ryan felt stares at his back with every step he took in the department. Conversation stopped abruptly when he entered a room. Even old friends began to avoid him. One afternoon, while Ryan was filing some reports, Sergeant Briggs appeared at his side. "Hey, Callahan," Briggs said, his voice falsely friendly. "I hear you and the new captain have been spending a lot of time together lately." Ryan felt his heart racing, but kept his voice steady. "Just doing my job, Sergeant." Briggs leaned closer, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Just a friendly word of advice, partner. Be careful which side you take. Loyalty is everything in this job." As Briggs walked away, Ryan felt a shiver run down his spine. The veiled threat hung in the air, as tangible as the tension that now permeated the department. That evening, Ryan met Lucas in a discreet cafe on the outskirts of town. The place was almost empty, perfect for a conversation that couldn't be overheard. "They know," Ryan said bluntly, his voice low. "I don't know how, but they know." Lucas nodded gravely. "I realized it too. Things are getting dangerous, Ryan. Maybe we should back off. At least for now." Ryan looked down at his untouched coffee, Briggs' words echoing in his mind. When he looked up, there was a fierce determination in his eyes. "No," he said firmly. "If we retreat now, they'll win. We have to keep going." Lucas studied Ryan's face for a long moment before nodding. "You're right. But we need to be smarter, more careful." As the two men plotted their next steps, outside, night fell over Millbrook. The city lights flickered to life, each holding its own secrets. The battle for the soul of the Millbrook Police Department was just beginning, and the lines between allies and enemies had never been so blurred. Fall in Millbrook was in full swing, the golden leaves dancing in the streets with every gust of wind. Ryan Callahan watched through the window of his car, parked in front of a convenience store on the corner of Elm Street and Oak Avenue. His eyes were fixed on the scene in front of him, but his mind was miles away. The radio crackled to life. "All units, We have an ongoing situation at 1420 Maple Street. Possible domestic violence. Ryan hesitated for a moment before responding. Unit 17 responding. En route. As he drove along the familiar streets, Ryan couldn't help but think about how things had changed in recent weeks. The investigation with Lucas had opened his eyes to a reality he had ignored for too long. Each call now carried a different weight, a responsibility that went beyond the simple fulfillment of duty. On arriving at the address, Ryan noticed another vehicle already parked. Officer Donovan, a veteran known for his aggressive methods, was standing on the porch, arguing heatedly with a man. "What's the situation?" Ryan asked, approaching cautiously. Donovan turned around, his face red with anger. "This idiot here doesn't want to cooperate. We have a report of violence, but he won't let us in." The man at the door, a middle-aged man with frightened eyes, tried to speak. "I told you, there's nothing going on here. It was just an argument with my daughter. You have no right to—" "Shut up!" Donovan shouted, advancing menacingly. Ryan quickly intervened, putting himself between the two. "Officer Donovan, I'm taking over from here. Why don't you check the perimeter?" Donovan glared at Ryan, but backed away. With a sigh of relief, Ryan turned to the man. "Sir, I understand your concern. Can we talk calmly about what happened?" Over the next few minutes, Ryan listened patiently as the man, Mr. Martinez, explained the situation. A heated argument with his teenage daughter had been misinterpreted by a neighbor. There was no violence, just the normal tensions of a family dealing with the challenges of adolescence. As Ryan talked, he noticed a subtle change in Mr. Martinez's posture. The initial fear gave way to hesitant relief, and then to cautious gratitude. "Thank you for listening to us," Mr. Martinez finally said. "The other policeman, he reminded me of bad experiences I've had in the past." Ryan nodded, feeling the weight of those words. "I'm sorry about that, sir. We're here to help, not intimidate." On leaving the Martinez residence, Ryan found Donovan waiting impatiently by the side of the car. "What the hell was that, Callahan?" Donovan growled. "Since when did you become a social worker?" Ryan stared at his colleague, feeling a mixture of pity and determination. "Since I remembered the true meaning of protecting and serving." On the way back to the police station, Ryan reflected on the incident. He thought about Lucas, the ongoing investigation, and how every little interaction like this was an opportunity for change. That evening, in his apartment, Ryan picked up an old photo of his graduation from the police academy. The idealistic young man staring back at him seemed like a stranger now, but for the first time in years, Ryan felt he was on the right path to reconnecting with that idealistic young man. The road to redemption was long and full of obstacles, but Ryan Callahan was determined to walk it, one step at a time. The Millbrook sky was filled with dark clouds, foreshadowing a storm that seemed to reflect the growing tension within the police department. Ryan Callahan walked through the corridors with determined steps, ignoring the suspicious glances of his colleagues. His destination, Captain Lucas Washington's office. Upon entering, Ryan found Lucas leaning over a pile of documents, his face marked by fatigue and worry. "We have a problem," Ryan said bluntly, closing the door behind him. "Sergeant Briggs is pushing for me to be transferred to the night shift. I think he's trying to break us up." Lucas looked up, his expression grave. "They're getting bolder. We need to act fast." "I agree," Ryan nodded, taking a seat. "But how? Every time we move, it seems like they're one step ahead." Lucas leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "Maybe it's time we changed our approach. We can't do this alone, Ryan. We need allies." "Allies?" Ryan frowned. "Who can we trust right now?" "I've been thinking about that," Lucas said, leaning forward. "Remember the journalist Olivia Ramirez? She's been doing a series of reports on police reform. Maybe it's time we shared some information with her." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. "That's risky, Lucas. If they find out we've leaked information—" "It's a risk we need to take," Lucas interrupted, his voice firm. "Besides, I have another contact, a community activist called Marcus Green. He has a support network in the Oak Hill neighborhood that can help us collect more evidence." Silence fell over the room as Ryan considered his options. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Okay, we'll do that. But we need to be extremely careful." In the weeks that followed, Ryan and Lucas worked tirelessly, building a network of allies outside the department. Clandestine meetings in discreet cafes, information exchanges in secluded parks, and long nights analyzing data became the new normal. Olivia Ramirez proved to be a valuable ally, her journalistic experience helping to connect dots that previously seemed disconnected. Marcus Green, meanwhile, brought a crucial community perspective, revealing patterns of police abuse that had gone unnoticed for years. Tension in the department reached feverish levels. Ryan and Lucas were openly shunned by many of their colleagues, and veiled threats became more frequent. But with each obstacle, their determination only grew. One rainy night, while leaving the department, Ryan noticed a suspicious car following him. His heart raced, but he remained calm, driving along familiar streets until he was sure he had lost his pursuer. When he got home, he found Lucas waiting at his door, his face pale with worry. "They broke into my apartment," Lucas said as soon as they entered. "They went through everything, but they didn't take anything. It's a clear message." Ryan felt a surge of anger and fear. "This ends now, Lucas. Tomorrow we'll make everything public, no matter what the consequences." Lucas nodded, a mixture of relief and determination in his eyes. "You're right. No more hiding. It's time we face this head-on." As the rain fell outside, the two men spent the night planning their next move. The battle for the soul of the Millbrook Police Department was about to reach its climax, and neither Ryan nor Lucas had any illusions about the risks they would face. But as the sun rose, bringing with it the promise of a new day, they both felt an unshakable certainty. Together, with the truth at their side, they would weather the storm to come. Dawn in Millbrook brought with it a palpable tension that hung over the town like a thick fog. At the police department, Ryan Callahan and Lucas Washington were preparing for the day that could change everything. The plan was simple, but dangerous: to publicly expose the corruption they had uncovered. Ryan adjusted his bulletproof vest, a grim reminder of the risks they faced. "Are you ready for this?" he asked Lucas, who was checking the files on his laptop for the last time. Lucas looked up, his expression a mixture of determination and apprehension. "As ready as I can be. Olivia is in place for the press conference. Marcus has his contacts ready to mobilize the community if necessary." The two men exchanged a look of mutual understanding. There was no turning back now. As they walked through the corridors of the department, the hostile stares of their colleagues followed them. The air was thick with whispers and tension. As they turned a corner, they found Sergeant Briggs blocking their path, flanked by two menacing-looking officers. "Where do you think you're going?" Briggs snarled, his face contorted with rage. Ryan stepped forward, his voice firm. "Get out of the way, Briggs. It's over." "You have no idea what you're doing," Briggs hissed. "You're destroying years of work, putting the safety of this city at risk." Lucas intervened, his voice calm but laden with authority. "The only thing that threatens this city is the corruption that you and your cronies have perpetuated. That ends today." For a tense moment, it looked as if the situation would explode into violence. But then, to everyone's surprise, Officer Chen appeared next to Ryan and Lucas. "They're not alone," Chen declared, his voice trembling slightly, but his eyes firm. One by one, other officers began to join them. Young recruits, disillusioned veterans, all united by a common desire for change. Briggs and his allies retreated, outnumbered and outgunned. With the way clear, Ryan and Lucas made their way to the conference room, where Olivia Ramirez and a host of other journalists were waiting. Cameras started flashing as soon as they entered. Lucas approached the microphone, his voice echoing through the silent room. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. We are here today to expose a painful but necessary truth." As Lucas spoke, detailing the evidence they had collected, Ryan watched the reactions in the room. Shock, indignation, and finally, a collective determination began to form on the faces of those present. Outside, a crowd began to form, led by Marcus Green. Posters demanding justice and reform were raised, their voices echoing through the streets of Millbrook. The revelation lasted for hours. Questions were asked, answers were given, and the truth, buried for so long, finally came out. When it was all over, Ryan and Lucas left the department exhausted, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The battle was far from over. There would be investigations, trials, and the difficult task of rebuilding the community's trust. But today, they had taken the first crucial step. As the sun set over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ryan and Lucas shared a look of mutual understanding. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, there was hope in the air. The town of Millbrook was ready for a new beginning, and they would be there to guide it through this transformation. Fall in Millbrook had given way to a harsh winter, but inside the police department, a warmth of change was spreading. 3 months had passed since the press conference that shook the foundations of the city, and the dust was finally beginning to settle. Ryan Callahan watched from the window of his new office, the snowflakes falling gently outside. As the newly appointed head of the Police Integrity Unit, he carried the weight of responsibility for rebuilding community trust. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Lucas Washington, now Deputy Chief of the department. "Ready for the meeting?" Lucas asked, a tired but satisfied smile on his face. Ryan nodded, picking up his briefcase. "As ready as I can be." Together they walked to the conference room, where an eclectic mix of faces awaited them. Police officers sat side by side with community leaders, activists, and City Hall representatives. Among them, Ryan recognized Olivia Ramirez and Marcus Green, whose support had been crucial in recent months. "Welcome, everyone," Ryan began, his voice firm but warm. "We are here today to discuss the next steps in our journey of reform and reconciliation." The hours that followed were intense but productive. Ideas were exchanged, concerns were voiced, and solutions began to take shape. A training program in racial awareness and conflict de-escalation, a civilian oversight commission, community policing initiatives that would go beyond routine patrols. "It won't be easy," Marcus Green commented at one point. "There are decades of mistrust to overcome." Lucas nodded, recognizing the truth in the activist's words. "You're right, but we are committed to this change, no matter how long it takes." As the meeting drew to a close, Ryan felt a wave of emotion hit him. Looking around the room, he saw hope in people's eyes, something that seemed impossible just a few months ago. Later, as Ryan and Lucas walked together through the snow-covered parking lot, a comfortable silence hung between them. "Did you ever think," Lucas began, his breath forming little clouds in the cold air, "that all this started with a chance encounter on the street?" Ryan paused, remembering that fateful day when he had approached Lucas unfairly. "Sometimes I still wonder why you didn't give up on me at that moment." Lucas smiled, putting a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Because I saw something in you, Ryan. Something beyond prejudice and fear. I saw a good man struggling to find his way back." The words struck Ryan deeply. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice laced with emotion. As they said goodbye, each heading for their own car, Ryan reflected on the journey that had brought them there. The doubts, the fears, the moments of despair, but also the courage, the determination and, above all, the hope that had guided them through the darkness. The road ahead was still long and full of challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Ryan Callahan felt that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing. And with allies like Lucas by his side, he knew that nothing was impossible. As he drove home that night, the lights of Millbrook glowing against the dark winter sky, Ryan felt a peace he hadn't experienced for a long time. A new era had begun for Millbrook, and he was proud to be a part of it. Spring had arrived in Millbrook, bringing with it not only the blooming of flowers, but also the blossoming of a new era for the town. A year had passed since the press conference that exposed corruption in the police department, and changes were visible around every corner. Ryan Callahan walked through the Central Park, observing the families enjoying the sunny day. Children of all colors played together, their laughter echoing in the air. Not far away, a police officer chatted amiably with a group of teenagers, a scene that would have been unthinkable just a year ago. It's quite a sight, isn't it? Lucas Washington's voice snapped Ryan out of his thoughts. Ryan smiled, nodding. Sometimes I still wonder if I'm dreaming. The two men walked side by side, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The changes in the department had been profound. New training protocols, an active civilian oversight committee, and a renewed commitment to community policing. I heard you were invited to speak at the National Conference on Police Reform, Lucas commented, a hint of pride in his voice. Ryan blushed slightly. Yeah, I'm still trying to process that. Who knew that I, of all people, would be giving talks about change and reconciliation? They made their way to a bench overlooking the lake, sitting down to enjoy the scenery. In the distance, they could see Marcus Green leading a group of volunteers in a community cleanup project. Olivia Ramirez was there too, her camera capturing the spirit of cooperation that now defined Millbrook. You know, Lucas began, his voice soft, when I was a kid growing up in Oak Hill, I used to be afraid of the police. Now I see kids waving at the officers, asking to take pictures with them. It's surreal. Ryan felt a lump in his throat. I'm so sorry, Lucas, for everything you and so many others have had to go through. Lucas put a hand on Ryan's shoulder. The past can't be changed, Ryan, but the future is in our hands. And look what we've managed to build together. At that moment, Ryan's phone rang. It was a message from Officer Chen, reporting on the success of a new mentoring initiative between police officers and at-risk youth. Good news? Lucas asked, noticing Ryan's smile. The best, Ryan replied, sharing the content of the message. That's what makes it all worthwhile, isn't it? Every little victory, every life we touch. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Ryan and Lucas stood up, ready to face the challenges that were yet to come. They knew the work was far from over. Deep-rooted prejudices don't disappear overnight, and trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But looking at the town they loved, at the people they had sworn to protect and serve, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. Millbrook had become a beacon of hope, an example of what could be achieved when a community comes together in search of justice and mutual understanding. And so, as they walked back to their respective homes, Ryan Callahan and Lucas Washington carried with them not only the lessons of the past, but also the promise of a brighter future. A future they had helped shape, one step at a time, with courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to change. If you were in Ryan Callahan's shoes at the beginning of the story, faced with the choice between maintaining status or allying with Lucas Washington to expose corruption in the police department, which decision would you make, and why? Consider the personal and professional risks involved, as well as the potential impact on the Millbrook community. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.